Hello, my name is Marcelo Buzato. I'm from the Applied Linguistics Department at the University of Campinas, Brazil. The problem that I'm addressing in this presentation is our relationship with talking machines. We've been used for quite a while now to be interacting with certain devices using natural language interfaces, and they've been useful in some cases, but the idea that you're talking to another intelligent creature in these systems was very feeble. Whereas now what you have is much better systems that we call large language models. They've become more social. There's this tendency now for these agents to be part of our let's say sociability. And I want to approach this problem from a post-humanist perspective, pretty much in the same way that Pennycook has proposed that we think about critical post-humanist applied linguistics. Only my focus is on technology. I try to dig deeper into the technological aspects of our post-humanness, let's say. So the theoretical foundations of this discussion that I'm bringing today are used for me to develop the idea that non-human cognizers, such as artificial intelligent agents, they might not be conscious, but they have cognition and they have agency. When I say they have agency, I'm not saying they have intentionality, but the point is they are productive. They guide us towards certain goals in our relation to online texts, and now they're also, conquering this position of knowledgeable subjects. So these are the two authors that I use. I'd like to point out to Catherine Hales's idea of a new unconscious for the humanities. She's called her model the cognitive unconscious model, and all that she's doing is she's attributing cognition not only to machines but to animals by defining cognition as basically the ability of any organism or machine to adapt to messages coming from their immediate environment. What's interesting here is that Hales is including in these modes of awareness human consciousness, which is a very special mode of awareness that some enthusiasts claim artificial intelligence might be able to achieve at some point, but that's very questionable. But the thing is, these agents are aware of certain things. We wouldn't say they know the meaning of natural language, but they're aware that when some syntactical pattern is used, they're supposed to use some other in response that would be coherence, right? So that's awareness. Alright, these models are huge, they're very expensive, they're very powerful, and they're growing exponentially. The most important thing, they're generative. They're churning out a lot of text every day, everywhere. It's very easy for us to, reduce the system to the interface and think of one intelligent being like a brain talking to us. But actually, the idea of a cognitive assemblage, that's pretty accurate to what's happening. So here what you have is an account of where the corpus comes from. They really have this very complex and well taken care of database of text. And where does that text come from? It comes from websites where you've had human editors, human writers, very carefully writing, revising, evaluating texts, translating texts. And there is this extra thing which is called reinforcement learning with human feedback. And that's a nice expression to say that you have thousands, literally thousands of workers in countries such as Kenya, other countries in the south. Their work is basically to spend 8 to 12 hours a day cleaning up the corpus. They eliminate, certain content that's not supposed to be out there for legal reasons, such as disinformation and hallucinations, sexual content, and stuff like this. But they're also judging on that output, whether the output that the model is producing sounds natural to a human being. So that's pretty much where consciousness joins in this assemblage of non-conscious cognition of the model. Here's just so you have an idea. You can pause the video. It's a lot of text, but you can pause the video and look. A lot of what these people do could be done by not so knowledgeable people, but people competent in a language. But most of what needs to be done requires reference to the real world, cultural and intercultural competence, sensitivity to language registers, sometimes to language enunciation conditions, such as when do you use a term that's politically correct or incorrect, depends on who's talking to who. So that's, again, consciousness being poured into this model that then, presents itself to us as a chat box that's knowledgeable. And these people make like $2 an hour, and there have been cases of post-traumatic stress because they filter a lot of inappropriate content, violence. They're cleaning up. This is like cleaning out the pollution so we can breathe. Okay, so the point here today is, how do you study that? What's the methodological strategy? And so I start from a model in human-computer interaction in the computer sciences called the semiotic engineering model. This model is interesting because it doesn't focus only on those messages that are exchanged between the system and the user, but then there is this subliminal message, this metacognitive message that comes with the interface from the designer, and it says in many ways to the user, this is the system I projected for you, it's my interpretation of who you are, what you want or need, and why you need that. And here's an example. On the Congress website, the use of different pointers, the hand pointer and the arrow pointer, are one way for the designer to say that the video is about the Congress, and if you want to watch the video, you're supposed to click. Now, my point is, that doesn't really describe our relationship to large language models. And so I'm resorting to post-phenomenology, and to the idea that we have different kinds of relationships with machines and with the world. In our relation with technology, our consciousness guides us towards backgrounding parts of the world and foregrounding other parts, so that we and the technology can work as one. This comes from Heidegger's distinction between the tool or the technology present at hand, which is basically the technical, the epistemic description of the tool, and the phenomenological tool, let's say the tool ready at hand, or the tool and the human in use in the context of the world and the relationship. There are several possible human-technology relations, but these are the four that are most relevant to this research. One of them is embodiment, which means technology becomes part of your body. Your consciousness makes technology fade away so you can focus on the task. That's what happens, for instance, when we use good glasses, clean, good, appropriate glasses. Another one is an interpretation relation, a hermeneutical relation, when the technology shows you the world in ways that you wouldn't be able to see with your embodied natural equipment. So Google Maps is a good example. Then you have the authority relation, which is important to us, and that's when you treat the technology as a social partner. But then backgrounding is when really the world and the technology fuse, so that there is no difference between the world and the technology, And then of course, the most obvious example is virtual reality. All right, if you look at these dialogues with large language models, they're clearly part of this dialogue has to do with building an authority relationship with the machine. And in these relations, there's the funny thing that you have to project a theory of mind on the artifact, on a technology. So a theory of mind is, you probably know, is the ability human consciousness provides us with of having an idea that somebody else is thinking about something which might not be the same thing, something that we are thinking, right? So you attribute something or someone with the possibility to think about the world, and more than that, to have ideas about the world that are not the same as we do. That's a very important development in our evolutionary trajectory, right? The idea is that we have this disposition of personifying machines, and these machines, they respond to that in a very competent way. It's a very good trick that they play, right? And more than that, if you're dealing with one of those agents, you don't have a choice not to do that, because you can't get what you need from the model unless you play this game of pretending the model can think. In the long run, right, these models get artificially reinforced because we adapt to their language, and there is this risk, right, that language as a living thing will have some sort of impact, right? It's like an environmental impact. We can hypothesize that with this amount of text and this amount of human artificial intelligence interactions, automated interactions going on every day in practical language use, there are going to be consequences. All right, but that's not the central point. The central point is, okay, to analyze this sort of interaction, then I'm proposing to adapt the engineering symbiotics model with some input from post-phenomenology. And then the idea is to think that now that the agent is supposed to be intelligent, then it's up to us to use some kind of metacognitive or second order thinking, not second order communication, but second order thinking in order to be able to play the game. So it's like our message is that we must pretend that the machine has a mind and that the machine shares semiotic content of the symbols that for us are words, and for the machine is basically a sequence of symbols, an informational pattern. And if you're not able to do that, then you can't operate on the machine. And so what you have is adapting your discursive or linguistic competence to the algorithmic competence of the machine. And here's where posthumanism speaks loud, right? Are we modeling humans in artificial intelligence or vice versa? The idea is that inside the relationship with the machine, which is, it all works as if the machine were a social partner, then there is the user decoding how the machine is doing the trick and adapting to the trick, and that would be a hermeneutical relationship. But then there is all the backgrounding of the corpus and of these humans that are filtering this content and making it sound natural by eliminating whatever the machine produces that's not natural, and then feeding back with these error patterns to adjust the database, right? It's a much more complex, let's say, conversation between user and designer, or should we say between society and technology providers such as the big techs, the designers of artificial intelligence, right? So if you try to apply the model to do some sort of analysis, right, and this is what I'm doing right now, what I'm sharing with you, you can break down these conversations in the different kinds of relations, right? There is authority going on at some point. There is, interpretation of the world through the model. So understanding how the model sees the world, or how the model lets us see the model in the world. And then there is background, right? When, for instance, the model speaks of itself as if it were human, but then not only trying to be a partner, but also hiding the fact that it's not. So here's one example. Here's another example. What I'd like to note here is that if you address the model in a social way, then it will stay in that mode, and then this illusion grows. But then if you address it with reference to some kind of knowledge without personifying it, then chances that an authority relation is carried on are lower. So that speaks to literacies, right? Artificial intelligence literacies. How much do we need to be in the game to, reap the benefits of artificial intelligence, and how much this game is, basically diverting us from the real meaning and the real function and real nature of natural language when you try to, play the game of treating the machine as a human. And that's not because humans are superior or inferior. This is like a symmetrical approach. That's why I'm bringing Bruno Latour to the picture. But the idea is the way it's being done is also anthropocentrical, right? It's what I call anthropocentrical engineering, right? All right, so what are the implications for the post-humanist applied linguistics? Well, there's an issue here about authority and otherness, right? Otherness is more than just dialogical competence, right? Otherness has to do with, situated selves, with histories, with bodies, right? And you can't just, erase that with plausible texts, right? Then there's the case of what's the responsibility of the producers and of the users in these different modes of relation with the technology, right? Then there is what's going to happen to languages in terms of variation, change, and linguistic creativity with the use of such massive models of language that they just average out text that they brought from a corpus that's not a conversational corpus. Really, it's not, it's a very standardized corpus, right? And then what's the impact of this second order thinking, right, in the automation across genres, and in the case of language learning? The idea is when I'm interacting with the machine, there's a kind of second order thinking going on that's not the same as when you're interacting with a human who's a speaker of a second language, although we know metacognition is going on too, right? What's the impact? So you can think of these models, right? And the way this is being done, by employing people that are hidden in poor countries and taking care of things the model can't handle, so you claim the model can handle things it really can't. It's an assemblage, it's not one persona, right? And so this reminds me a lot of the idea of the plantation, or reaping or harvesting consciousness in the South to produce something that's more that's modern and that's Western, right? Then there's the idea of the natives, and when I say native here, it's in the anthropological way, meaning really. Natives' natural languages need to be adapted to these reductionist ontologies and epistemologies of language. It's not just a matter of solving my problems by using the way the system works. With this amount of text being churned out every day and how useful it is, it's pretty much a blow in a lot of our considerations about the nature of language. And then there's the issue of anthropocentric engineering, which I think we do a lot more for post-humanist applied linguistics by questioning this, how reducing humans to an engineering project is a form of colonialism, right? And so thank you for watching. This is some related work that I've been doing. My contact details are here. I'll be glad to be in touch if you have any comments or criticism or questions.